Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Dave Sands. Welcome to the Food Origins podcast. I'll be talking to people about their unique stories with food. And as a quick reminder, the restaurants and gear talked about on each episode can be found on my website, foodoriginspodcast.com. I appreciate your support. And thanks for listening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Food Origins podcast. Today, my guest is Howard Bulka, who was born in Chicago, Illinois, and raised in Los Angeles, California. Howard studied economics in college in San Francisco, but suddenly realized he hadn't found his calling until a friend suggested he become a chef. With that in mind, Howie sought out the knowledge to begin his new career choice by going door to door, talking to hotels and restaurant chefs for their advice. Howie soon was hired to start cooking pastry in downtown San Francisco, and the rest is history. Howie spent the next 40 years cooking, managing, and consulting with and for some of the best chefs and restaurants in the world. After restaurant consulting for over 10 years, Howie finally decided to open his own restaurant with a concept of having simple ingredients and great food. Howie first worked in Menlo Park, California with opening Marche restaurant, and then moved on to open Howie's Artisan Pizza in 2009 at the Town & Country Village Shopping Center in Palo Alto, California. Voted best pizza by readers of Palo Alto Weekly, Howie's Pizza continues to offer a truly artisan experience. Chef Howard Bulka is in pursuit of perfect pie, and the proof is on the plate. Howie's is a much-loved neighborhood Italian restaurant offering a diverse menu of pizza, handmade pasta, appetizers, big fresh salads, and a well-selected list of beer and wine, and now also some provisions. On the podcast, Chef Bulka recalls his incredible culinary career journey, helps us understand the restaurant business, new and old ideas, hard work pays off, local favorites, and his depiction of what delicious offerings are available at the restaurant. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. Boom, we're rolling, recording.
Oh boy.
I am here with Howard Bulka of Howie's Artisan Pizza, and we are on location in Palo Alto, California at the restaurant. Howie, thanks for having us and having me here, and appreciate you coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Look forward to talking with you.
Yeah, and of course, another guest on the podcast connected us, thanks to Chef Guillaume at Zola Palo Alto.
Terrific restaurant, by the way.
Terrific place.
Had dinner there last night.
Yep, and if you guys listen to episode 20, you guys can hear all about that. And thanks, Howie. Let's just jump right into it. Why don't you
Sure.
give us a little history of yourself, where you're born, raised, and where you're from, and all that good stuff.
Well, so I was born in Chicago, Illinois, but family moved to Los Angeles when I was a baby. So basically grew up in Los Angeles and started college, moved out of Los Angeles, started college in San Francisco. So I went to San Francisco State University and got a bachelor's degree in economics. Graduated in 1981, 1982, something like that. And it was as I was approaching graduation, I sort of realized I had made a fundamental mistake to my approach to career. So somewhere in there, I decided to pursue a culinary career, become a chef. And that was, well, do the arithmetic yourself. That was some 40 years ago.
Awesome. And, with food, I always ask is, what was it like? What was your childhood like with food growing up? What did you eat growing up?
Well, my mother was a good cook, and but she was we were not your typical sort of Los Angeles family. My parents had come to this country after World War II from Poland. They were Holocaust survivors of Hitler's Germany, and started their life on the East Coast. As I said, we started in Chicago and then made our way to the West Coast. So growing up, I ate what my mother cooked, of course, as most kids do, and that was sort of an odd melange of American meatloaf, mashed potatoes, spaghetti with stuffed cabbage and cholent and pot roast and other things that were more conducive or more part of her childhood growing up in Poland. But she was a very competent cook. She, as a child, she had grown up in a household with children, and she, being the eldest daughter, she was called upon to do a lot of the cooking. And so, my mother's, in her odd way, was very competent, but she did things in her own untrained and peculiar way, which I reminisce quite fondly about now. At the time, it was a bit more curious. But she was very adept at, even in the years when she held down a job, she was very adept at putting a meal on the table for her family. In those days, of course, eating out was not quite, we, as a family, we didn't eat out very often, certainly not as much as contemporary families do. If we ate out once a week, that was a lot. But otherwise, she made our lunches every morning. There was breakfast and brunch on the weekends. There was family dinner every night. And somehow she just kind of pulled it off with a real aplomb, and quite well,
I read one of your old blog posts that talked about cauliflower. You want to tell us about that?
Well, I'm often quoted saying cauliflower is my favorite thing in the world. So, but I just find that the versatility of cauliflower and it just seems to be one of it's something that's always on my table for one reason or another.
Yeah, and it you described how it kind of changed you a little bit. She does buttered breadcrumbs, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the recipe itself. Yeah.
Well, she did. Yeah, it was. So it's still something I do quite often. She would essentially take cauliflower, trimmed and prepped florets in the raw in a pan, with a little bit of butter or a little bit of chicken fat.
Okay.
And she would saute it slowly until it browned and cooked through, at which time she would take the fat that was left in the pan and add fresh breadcrumbs to it.
Nice.
As the breadcrumbs would toast, pick up the remaining butter, chicken fat, schmaltz, if you will, in the pan, and turn something really simple into something really marvelous. And of course, that's the magic of every good cook, right?
Yeah. It's such a simple dish, but it sounds so delicious.
Well, the best things always are, right?
Yeah.
I somewhere along this in my culinary career, I just got hooked on the notion of simplicity. I just found that at a very early point in my career, probably influenced by some of the chefs I worked with, that a simple thing done impeccably well was always better than a complicated thing done, and that if you really wanted to touch people where it's important, in their soul, in their heart, in their memories, it's always done with simple food. If you ask people to recount the best meals they've ever had, it's always like a 2-ingredient plate of food, right?
Yeah.
And I was speaking with my son the other day about, I was watching some YouTube videos or something about a 3-star dining experience where they sort of just roll through each course, which is like 25 or whatever.
Right.
I thought it was somewhat absurd how complicated and how many ingredients were represented in, and to what extent they had gone to create a dish. And I'm no stranger to 3-star food. I mean, I've worked in 3-star restaurants. I've eaten in a gajillion of them.
Yeah.
And in the contemporary sense, that styling has gotten so based on sort of, I think, the dynamics of the molecular gastronomy, but also just these. It has a lot to do with the economics of restaurants. There's this real need, I think, that chefs feel or restaurant owners feel to create something that is so fabulously complicated that it. Well, I'm not sure what their intentions are. I'm not sure if they're to justify the price point or to. But I think it gets to a point where it's, you show people enough tricks, and you just look like someone who does tricks. You don't really look like an artist anymore. And so me personally, I've always thought that if you can make something delicious with 3 ingredients, that's magical.
Yeah.
But give me $1 million kitchen and a Paco jet and 1 million different apparati. Anybody who's cooked as long as I can build those kind of plates. But and if it's fundamental to your business model, power to you. But to what end? I'm not even sure it's food anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some recent events that kind of leading up to what you're talking about with
Sure, the
Noma closing. How long can that be sustained? But let's get back into some of your training. So, like you said, you had to kind of turn around after college.
Right.
What kind of sparked you into food, and then then tell us into the training, and then kind of some of the places you started working and
sure
getting into it.
Food had always been a hobby, and certainly because of my mother, I sort of had been bit by the hospitality bug. My mother, in addition to being, a very competent cook, was sort of, one of those people for whom it was impossible to leave my mother's house without being fed. And the times in her life when my mother was most happy was when we were around the table. And so she loved having people in her home. She loved being the host, and that sort of rubbed off on me somehow. I've always felt that at least part of what drove me into this crazy business was my sentiments about hospitality as much as sort of my love of the craft. And but anyway, so I had come to that moment in time, as a lot of college graduates do. It's like, what the fuck, Like,
what are you gonna do?
How did that happen? I got a degree in economics. How did that happen? That wasn't, I started college as a creative writing major and other. I was like, what?
Did you have an idea at that time, like, oh, I'm gonna do, what you wanted to do with economics, or?
Well, no, but you know how it is. You get you spend enough time with people that are like-minded, you begin to think like them, and so it's like, I don't know, like, what do you do with a bachelor's degree in economics? You get a master's degree in economics. What do you do with a master's degree in economics? You get a PhD in economics. And but no, I woke up from my dream state to discover, like, how did I, okay, this was fine. But when I graduated from college, the prize was to just get a liberal arts education. You get a bachelor's degree and you're done, and then you go out into the world. There wasn't so much expectation that degree in economics would be professional preparatory in any way. So, but nonetheless, my parents were quite terrified when I said, "Oh, and I've decided to be a chef." And but anyway, so cooking had been a hobby. I realized I'd made a fundamental mistake. I was literally, I'd made lasagna for dinner. I was sitting around the table talking with the woman who would become my wife, and a dear friend. And it's like, okay, what is Howie going to do for a living? What do I do now? And it was starting like, well, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? And we said, writing, blah, 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 cooking. And my friend Peter said, why don't you be a chef? And it was just like, boing.
Yeah, light bulb.
Yeah, the light bulb went off. I was like, oh, be a chef? Like, I don't know. Like, do people actually do that? I was like, certainly no one in my family, right? In my family, you were either a lawyer or a doctor. You killed yourself. There was so much in between.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so I literally the next day said, "Okay, how does one become a chef?"
Yeah.
And I, there was no internet then.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I immediately got on the phone to the Culinary Institute of America. And I said, can you send me your materials? And they did, in the mail, the brochure. And then I would literally walk. We were living in San Francisco. Everywhere I would walk into a restaurant or a hotel and just walk in the service entrance and say, can you, where's the chef? And he'd point me to him, and I'd say, mind if I ask you a couple of questions? He goes, sure. I said, how do you become a chef? How long does it take? And what do you get paid? And I talked to, maybe a handful, 10 people.
Okay.
And I got the same answers from all of them. And one of the questions the fourth question was, should I go to culinary school? Right. So basically, make a long story.
That's short. A really good way to do it, though. Yeah.
Sure. Why not? Well, what would be, imagine a world before the internet.
Right. This is how you do it, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's not. And I should, at the end of that trail, which was only a few months, someone I asked those questions, she said, well, it was a restaurant opening on Union Street. I said, well, come work for me. That was my first real job in a restaurant. And
what restaurant was that?
It was called Bistro Les Halles.
Okay.
It's where, oh God, there have been a million restaurants there since then, but it was where, originally it was shit, I forgot the name. It's that company that they had restaurants in cable cars in Victoria Station.
Okay.
It was Victoria Station, and then it
Nice.
was an Italian restaurant. It was an Asian restaurant. There
You
was
don't
a
have
French
to
restaurant.
recall all the
Anyway.
flip overs, but
Yeah, anyway,
that's your start. So you got your start
I'm babbling
there.
on. It's the drugs. And but the answer to the question, most fundamentally important, was no. Everyone said, well, someone asked, who's paying for culinary school? And I said, not my parents. And they said, well, don't go. But basically everyone said, no, culinary school is a waste of time and money. And if you want to, so how long does it take to become a chef? 10 years. How do you do it? Just start working in restaurants. Find a good chef who'll take you in. What's the money like? Terrible. Should I go to culinary school? No.
Yeah.
So armed with that body of information, like I said, person who became my friend Andy gave me this job at this restaurant. I started in the pantry. Turns out, just coincidentally, the consultants for that restaurant was Wolfgang Puck and his partner at Ma Maison in Los Angeles, a guy named Patrick Turay. So we didn't see much of them. They were sort of arm's distance consultants, but my sort of first week in the kitchen was with Wolfgang Puck. And by the end of that year at that job, Wolfgang, who was no longer at Spago, at Ma Maison, had now already moved to Spago.
Spago, yeah.
He just said, look, if you're ever in LA, if you want to come hang out in the kitchen, come hang out. And well, my family, I grew up in LA. I'm in LA all the time.
Yeah.
So anyway, did that. And then at that restaurant, I became the pastry chef, strangely enough. Just, through no fault of my own, the pastry chef was a raving alcoholic and was pulled out of the restaurant feet first one day. And they said, why don't you just be the pastry chef now? And then because I had a taste of pastry making, I was, remember that sort of brochure I told you about I got from the Culinary Academy? Well,
Yeah.
It was a syllabus. Among other things, they sent me their course syllabus.
Okay.
Which was, like sauce making 101, and pastry making 101, viennoiserie, cakes, pies, tarts. And I used that as sort of for many years, I had that pin up on my bulletin board in my room. And I used that as a sort of what I called areas of ignorance that needed to be checked off. Right? And I thought, so I started making pastry badly in this restaurant called Bistro Les Halles, and said, well, I gotta learn how to do this. I can't just be an idiot.
Yeah.
And that took me through a pastry run. Then from the pastry run, I moved into other parts of the kitchen, and then ended up in Los Angeles. So we were, my wife then, Jen, we had already decided that at some point I would go to France to work, and that we would live in France for a while to sort of, to just enjoy life, and that's how we learned to cook.
Yeah.
And so I ended up for a while there in Los Angeles at a restaurant called La Toque, run by a guy named Ken Frank, who was sort of one of the group of young chefs in LA that spearheaded the California Nouvelle movement there. Michael McCarty, Roy Yamaguchi, Mark Peel, Nancy Silverton. Those are all alumnus of Michael's restaurant in Santa Monica, including Ken Frank, who opened La Toque, Sunset Boulevard. At that point in my career, I'd been doing this a while. I became chef de cuisine there.
Okay.
While I was chef de cuisine there, I began working in the Napa Valley as a pickup crew for a program that was called the Cooking with the Great Chefs of France, that was sponsored by the Mondavi Winery.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just had mutual friends who lived up here, who had become sort of the kitchen crew, the chef, etc., of that program. And they began to invite me at first once or twice a year, then 6 times a year, to come up to the Mondavi Winery and do a week's worth of cooking classes and dinners or lunches and meals with a 3-star French chef. So in the course of those gatherings, I got an opportunity to work with a lot of them: Bocuse, Trois Gros, Chappelle, Sanderans, Marc Minot, the Trois Gros brothers, on and on and on.
So they were just bringing in people left and right.
Yeah, they would bring them in for a week's worth of events for a group of 20 very well-heeled. It was a very expensive moment.
Wow.
Participants, students as they called them, because every day was a class and every day was a meal. And we were just the kitchen crew for it. So it allowed me a really unique opportunity to work intimately with a lot of really, really crazy talented people. I mean, the best cooks in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then along this trail, I met, one of those weekends was with Alan Chappelle. And one of those weekends was with Paul Bocuse. And while they were there, I said, I'm coming to France next year. Can I come work for you in your kitchen? And they said, yeah.
Yeah.
So in 1985, we went to France and for about a year. And then in part of that year, I did 2 stages, which is just kind of unpaid kitchen work. It's called, You're working as what they call a stagiaire. One in the kitchen of Alan Chappelle, and the other one in the kitchen of Paul Bocuse, both of them in the Lyon area of France. Bocuse just really on the outskirts of Lyon, and Chappelle in the middle of fucking nowhere out in a field somewhere. an hour.
The hills of France.
Yeah, and that was my, that was my master's degree, right? That's
100%.
Yeah, so I was a pretty experienced cook. Again, we were doing some pretty high-level stuff at Le Toque, and I was running that kitchen. And
how long did you stay in France for?
For about a year. So I did each stage was about 3-4 months.
Okay.
And then the rest of the time we just enjoyed our time.
Nice. And then you came back to
We came
LA.
back to LA briefly. We basically came back to the Bay Area. And then I had a job. I was kind of floating around, trying to get established. At that point, you can imagine, for an American cook, at that time, I had a pretty serious resume.
Yeah.
So I'd been a pastry chef. I'd run a hotel kitchen. We didn't talk about my hotel days. I'd been to France. I've been in 2-3-star kitchens. And so in those days, that was a pretty unique resume. There weren't a lot of people that could have that kind of experience. And I was college educated, and I could, put a sentence together. So I eventually, or fairly shortly thereafter, I kicked around. I worked for a little while at Square One with Joyce Goldstein, just sort of biding time, trying to figure out. I had a gig working for Boz Scaggs and his brothers at the Blue Light Cafe on Union Street. These are all before you were born, David, I think. Probably.
I'm aware of Blue Light, but yeah.
And so I was the chef. I don't tell anybody this typically, so now the cat's out of the bag. I was the chef of the Blue Light Cafe, arguably the shittiest restaurant in San Francisco, for a very painful few months.
A very good venue, though, by the way.
A very successful bar, right? At that time, the hottest bar in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Couldn't get near the place, and then met the people from the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. So now, I was 28 years old when I got hired to be chef of the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. I had some painful resume notches that I got at the Fairmont Hotel in the pastry shop there. I told you my pastry, Marche, took me to the hotels.
Right.
And also the Clift Hotel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I working for Stan Bromley, was sort of legendary.
Yeah, right there, Union Square. Up the street.
So where would stop me at any time here? Because after 40 years, you can imagine how many fucking jobs I've had.
That's all right. You've got an awesome career, so we want to hear it.
It's like they say, poor schmuck can't keep a job, So so the Mandarin was someone, a mutual friend, knew the human resource director. I was wholly unqualified for the job.
Yeah.
And had also told myself after working in these San Francisco restaurants, San Francisco hotels, that I would never work in a hotel again. Because once you've done that, you don't want to go back, believe me. And but I, as a sort of somehow, for reasons that it would take me years to fully comprehend, they hired me. And so we opened the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in San Francisco, which of course is still there. And the restaurant was called Silks. And there was the Mandarin Lounge, which is, some weird bar downstairs, and then all that stuff, room service, banqueting,
full service,
staff cafeteria,
4-star hotel. So yeah.
So I'm 20 years old, and with
probably one of the most expensive hotels in the city at that time.
And for good reason. They were fabulous. I mean, the food service program was pretty nerdy, but they were fabulous hoteliers.
Yeah,
the best hotels in the world, right?
Yeah.
And so I did that for about 3 years.
Okay.
And lived to tell about it. And it's a story in itself, but I won't bore you with it. But it was an amazing learning experience. So it was just I knew how to cook at 28 years old, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I could light a fire in a kitchen, but I was not a manager. I was young and brash and stupid and disrespectful and all those things that young people are. And 3 years of the Mandarin taught me how to be a manager. And I don't mean just, sort of the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, really being able to, to connect with a staff, to inspire people, to put wind in people's sails when there's not enough wind in their sails, to make them feel good about themselves, about their profession, all that stuff. So I owe a debt of gratitude to the Mandarin for my whole career, for what for the time and the expense, and that they took to make sure that the people who worked for them were good managers.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was a good thing. And then there's more. Wait.
Yeah, where'd you go from there?
And I'm still only 28 years old. So that was now
it's okay.
31-ish when I decided, 32-ish when I said, I can't stand this anymore.
Yeah.
And they felt the same about me, believe it, by that point. They were like, get this kid out of here. And then I went into the wilderness. I became a consultant to restaurants for about a dozen years. The person who gave me my first job in a restaurant, way back when at Bistro Les Aux, somewhere in all those years had gone back to New York and become a big deal restaurant consultant with a company called George Lang and Associates.
Okay.
George Lang is a historic figure in the world of food, but again, probably dead before you were born. It's restaurants like the Windows of the World were like those guys' consulting projects. He was an offshoot of a company called the Restaurant Associates, who are the original restaurant consultants in America.
Mm-hmm.
All of the principals in RA are like historic names in food service. Larry Mandel was one of them, the guy that went on to run all the Il Fornaio chain and all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Andrew hooked up with these guys.
Okay.
George Lang said I started his own company, took Andrew with him as his vice, and as the dust settled, Andrew reached out to me and said, if you can commit X amount of time to my projects, then you can be our culinary guy.
Nice.
And at the time, I was so, what it had already been 10, 15 years of like never having a day off. I mean, I was a hard-working son of a bitch, and the time in France was brutal. You have no idea how much those guys work. And I just felt like, I really haven't had like a Christmas off in like 15 years.
Yeah.
And so I said, sure, let's do that. And it was sort of an intoxicating lifestyle after putting in all those hours and all that time and, all the craziness that is restaurants and hotels and all that. The work as a consultant was very civilized. Money was, and you had to keep working, but the money was good.
And explain to everybody what a restaurant consultant does.
Right, exactly. And of course, when you say that, everybody just think, well, that just means you're unemployed, right? It's like today, it's like, so it's a restaurant consultant. I said, you get any work? But they were the real deal. Without that infrastructure of George Lang and Associates, there's no way I would have been able to find work. It's just, as an independent restaurant consultant is a really difficult thing to make fly. There's a few of them, but not many. Anyway, so 12 years I was a consultant to restaurants, and we were busy. It was the real deal. I was 2 weeks a month traveling. Towards the end of that, or the second half of that time, our major clients were passenger ship lines. And so I was on boats all the time, going to exotic places. But in a funny way, for the first time, living like kind of a normal lifestyle.
Kind of normal hours.
Yeah, because in between gigs, you're just someone who's home for dinner. Right?
Yeah, nice.
And you get your weekends off, and you can go on vacation and go to the gym and do all those things that working chefs don't or can't. So that was a long time, but what I thought would be a year or two, just a respite, because what might be apparent in this, not be apparent in this conversation, is that the singular thing I love to do is cook. I'm happy when I'm in the kitchen, right? That doesn't mean I love every job I've ever had. It doesn't mean every day is fucking fabulous, but I was just born to be in a kitchen. Yeah. And so as a chef, as a consultant, I was in White's a lot. Mostly what I did is opened food service, opened restaurants for people, opened food service facilities for people. But I thought I would do it for a couple of years and then get back in the restaurant business. Always ultimately thinking I would own my own restaurant someday. And then, 1 year turned to 2, turned to 5, turned to 10. Again, I got intoxicated by it. And even though I said every New Year's resolution was, okay, this is the year I'm going to go back in the restaurant business, there was always, then Andy would call and say, we're going to the Galapagos Islands. It's like,
yeah.
Okay.
How do you pass that up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what happened? Then Marche opened. So
there we go.
In Menlo Park. Some friends of mine wanted to be in the restaurant business, even though I tried to talk them out of it. And they had seen a space in Woodside that they said this would, we want to buy this and do it. And I went to go look at it. It had already been bought. And they said, well, go find another space. And sure. And that was Marche. So we found a space in Menlo Park. We opened Marche. I ran it for 7 or 8 years, something like that. And, I reminisce really fondly about Marche, but it was just okay in terms of the next stage of my life. It was a very well reviewed and very well received restaurant. This was just before sort of Michelin starring happened in America, so there was no. But we ranked really high, like Gomeo and other guides. Certainly in the local press, we had whatever stars you could get, we got. But it was not a great money making experience. So because of that, it was never going to sort of lead to something next. And so I did it for a while. And at the beginning of that, my son was born. So it created a really great lifestyle. I was working nights. My wife was working days. Louis was crapping in his pants. And so it was just a really great 5 or 6, 7 years where I could just be a dad. And, after running hotels,
yeah.
a 60-seat dinner house doesn't quite seem as complicated. Small staff, small menu, 5 nights a week, dinner only.
Yeah.
It wasn't the toughest gig anybody ever had.
Yeah.
But it was very satisfying and a great clientele, Yeah. A lot of them are my partners here or our customers here.
Yeah, and you said Guillaume working for you as well, right?
That's right. And Guillaume became sous chef in there for a while. Then he took over when I left. Mm-hmm. I left before. I at the very last minute had a falling out with the lead partners. Okay. Just because it wasn't going anywhere. I either decide to stay here forever and take a salary, or I need to move on. Yeah. And that was the decision. And that was, the next step was this, where we are now at Howie's Artisan Pizza.
Yeah, and that's 2009, is that right, about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's 13 years ago.
Yeah. And what made you start Howie's? Why don't you give us what your idea was after being in these,
fine dining,
very well established restaurants and hotels, and then you getting into pizza and.
Well, there were a lot of motivations. I think all pretty noble, but I would be lying if I said, you don't want to make the same mistake twice. So if I'm gonna commit myself to something, live here, spend all these hours there, make 1 million pizzas in the next 5 years, then there has to be a long-term financial reward for doing that. Right. Otherwise, you just bought yourself a job, as they say, And so, having learned some hard lessons at Marche about the profitability of fine dining in the suburbs, I said, let's go where the market is. This is this peninsula, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, Los Altos. These are households with kids. These are family. This is
we're literally across the street from Stanford University.
Yeah, high levels of and Pali High, but
Right.
high education, super high income levels. But that's really what they are. They're households with kids.
Yeah.
And if so if you want to be successful, then hit the sweet spot in your market. And so that was a huge reason for wanting to do something that was family friendly. In fact, the corporate name that runs this restaurant is called Family Friendly Restaurants, because I didn't want to forget what our mission was. Right? This isn't fine dining. We're not here for stars and points. We're here to service a community, and and get a whole lot of love from a whole lot of people in our trade area. And I think we did. I think ultimately this has been a great ride. And also because, after all those years of fine dining, I just wanted to, as I said, I've always been sort of turned on by simple things.
Yeah.
I would much rather spend a year learning how to make pizza, just really getting into it, really starting to think about fermentation and, what a great pizza is all about, and all the different styles, and, what is the heart and soul of why is pizza so popular? It's one of those top 5 foods in America. It's for people under the age of 18. It's their favorite food, all that stuff. And so, that development process to me is really interesting, because I know nothing about pizza except I like to eat it when we started.
Right.
And so there was an opportunity to really dive deep into the science, art, and lore of a food product. And that was, and there were so many mysteries that you encounter, and that now, in hindsight, are sort of not mysterious anymore. Now we understand, we understand what happens on a warm day to our pizza dough. We know how to fix it. We know how to, we can,
So did you just dive hard right into figuring out how to make pizza as soon as you decided, okay, I'm going to start a pizza restaurant, among other things? We'll get into your menu in a little bit, but
yeah.
Did you just start diving into the science of it, and did you explore a bunch of places? And
oh yeah, all the above. So bear in mind that as a consultant for all those years, mostly what I did is write recipes.
Oh, yeah.
So one of my deliverables for almost every client we had was a recipe book.
Okay.
And so I wrote more recipes than you can imagine, meaning that I spent a lot of time in either a professional kitchen or my home kitchen, doing all that stuff. Writing recipes for real is real work. And so I was no stranger to sort of trying. I had a client once who had focaccia at the Bohemian cigar store, and said, "I need to make this for me."
Yeah.
So it's okay, so
figure it out.
And it, if it takes a month or it takes a year, then whatever, you just keep doing it till you get it right. Anyway, so with pizza, I began by going everywhere, eating everything. All the famous ones in New York, Bianco in Arizona, and what was that? The guy that went Una Pizza Napoletana, Tony something. He was in the Bay Area recently. I'm not sure he's still open, but he originally started in New York, and then. It was right about that time that a lot of people sort of read the same tea leaves I did. The idea that artisan pizza would reemerge, because on the West Coast we had already started to see it on the East Coast.
Yeah,
and I knew this was coming, and it was a moment in time when 15 years ago, really, when sort of handmade artisan pizza had sort of disappeared. Like a lot of things, the chain restaurants had just taken all the business.
Right, and they're just throwing on this ugly frozen dough, that
industrial product.
Right.
And, we all grew up with a neighborhood pizza place, with something was made from scratch with integrity and honesty.
Yeah.
And those were becoming pretty scarce in America.
Yeah.
The Domino's and Pizza Huts and Little Caesars had sort of taken over the world. And so there was a lot of room to move in the marketplace. And if you opened a great, if you open a great pizza place and the neighborhood didn't have one, you win.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't like?
I
pizza?
really like what you wrote about artisan pizza when you were talking about what is artisan pizza, and I'm going to quote something from your thing that I wrote. I wrote it out, and it's beautiful. It's basically what you wrote about. The styles. There's makers. There's different ways to make it, but you said their common thread is an artisan spirit, an unrelenting attention to detail, and a dogged determination to perfect their craft. Each of them suffers the vagaries of yeast, fire, seasonality, and the restaurant business for their chosen métier or job. I thought that summed it up right there.
Yeah. Well, what we haven't. It's as we've sort of been. As I've been talking ad nauseum about myself. What really is, I think, so fundamentally great about this industry is the community of artists and of just awesome quality human beings that run it.
Yeah.
Hardworking people that have a spirit of craft, artisanry, and hospitality, right? All these sort of, people that cook and run restaurants are, warts and all. They're some of the best people I've known.
Yeah.
And the people that work in restaurants, same thing. They're just hardworking, honest, family people with a whole lot of integrity, who have a great, have a great work ethic, and so as I went around and made my rounds and talked to people about the pizzas, you'd be amazed at how much information people want to share with me.
Just giving up secrets.
There are no secrets. It's like,
Yeah.
But believe me, the last thing that guys at Frank Pepe's are worried about are me on the West Coast,
Right.
But so I started that trail, and what I realized right away was that so I'm in New York eating pizza, so I'm looking at New York style pizza. And in the past, I'd been to Italy. I'd done the sort of the VPN pizzas, they call it, the veritable pizza napoletano, which is that, it's got a rule book and all that sort of stuff. It's the way they make pizza in Italy. It's to die for. I mean, it's incredibly great, but it's not American pizza. It's not New York pizza. It's a knife and fork single person thing. And Americans want big, crispy, skinny things you can share and watch in front of the television when you're watching football games. So, but what I realized is there's no pizzas I'm eating none of them are alike. So these are all New York pizzas. What's the common thread here? It's like some have sauce on top, some have sauce on bottom, some are this big, some are that big. Yeah. It's like, you've ever asked that question? It's like people say, what style of pizza do you make? You say, New York style. Like, okay, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? And then I was at, I think it was at a place called Grimaldi's, if I remember this now. It goes back a ways. And I was watching guys make pizza in their T-shirts, making this killer famous pizza. And I said, what? Oh, I asked him, what sort of cheese do you use? He says, we use the same cheese everybody uses. What's that? It's Grande. It's the company name.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Grande. Like, maybe that's the common thread. They all use the same cheese.
Yeah.
And then I was at another place, and I said, what sort of tomatoes do you use? And the same thing. He sort of said to me the equivalent of like, well, what everybody uses. We use Escalon Packers out of California, where you come from. Like, okay.
All right. And
then somewhere in there, I was asking, I asked my dry goods rep to find out what kind of flour these people use, right?
Yeah.
And he called around, he asked, and then he actually brought in one day a flour consultant, right? A guy who works at a flour mill, and because there's a lot of science goes on there. And this guy says to me, he goes, well, here's what, there's only really two flours any of these guys use. That's because it's the flour that's available to them, right?
Yeah.
What is it? He told me. It's like, there's kind of there's a General Mills version and another one. And so it turns out that all of these different pizzas were using the same flour, the same cheese, and the same tomato product. And I thought, well, boing. It's like, well, that's what New York pizza is.
Yeah.
That's what defines a New York pizza. I'm not sure anybody even realizes. It's like they talk about the water and all this other horse shit. It's like no, they're all using the same products, right?
Yeah.
And they come up with different pizzas historically. And so I came back here. I got all those products, and it was, other than before then, I'm using San Marzano tomatoes from San Marzano, and I'm using 00 flour because you think that's what a good pizza is all about. And then, in a sense, I mean, Escalon pack. I mean, take this with a grain of salt. You're using 3 crappy products basically to make a great pizza, because All Trump's flour is nothing to shake a stick at. Grande Mott's, you wouldn't eat it with a knife and fork. And Escalon Packers tomatoes is what every tomato in the supermarket is.
Okay.
Because there's really only 2 Packers in all of California, and all tomatoes come from California in the States. So otherwise you import them. Then you start using Italian tomatoes, all bets are off.
Right.
But and there's some organic stuff. There's Muir Glen and stuff like that. But anyway, when I finally consolidated those products into my kitchen, which then was at home, this place didn't exist. Everything started to turn out great. The sauce was like, yeah, that's it. That's what the sauce is supposed to taste like, and on and on. And the Grande Mott's, once you melt that over a pizza, you're never going to use any other mozzarella. It's just the best. Anyway, so that was part of the discovery, and the rest of it. As I what I realized, then you can't make the pizza you're going to sell until you're in the restaurant you're going to sell it in.
Yeah. Because
for practical reasons, how the hell do you cook a pizza at home, right? In an oven that only gets to 500 degrees. How do you get to 600? And also because the scaling of it all, when you take all that stuff and you turn it into 300 pizzas a day, everything changes.
Yeah.
Nothing's the same.
Right.
So like the first, okay, here's our sauce recipe. This will scale up. Dough is dough. It's mysterious. That's just going to be what it is until we get to the shop. Until we get a kitchen space, and then all of a sudden, a year later, kaboom, restaurant's finished. It's time to get open.
Nice. And what kind of oven are you guys using?
We use a Marche oven, which is a true brick oven, gas fired. Sort of the I like to think of it as sort of the Rolls Royce of ovens. Mm-hmm. It's in New York. Well, that was one of the things I learned about New York pizza. This is the oven they all use. So in New York, by and large, you can't light a new live wood fire, right? It's just not permitted anymore. You can inherit a wood fire and use it again.
Okay.
So if you're going to open a pizza place in New York in the last, 10 years, 15 years, you had to use a gas oven. There was no choice.
Okay.
And there's really no magic to wood ovens, because the heat is created in an isolated chamber, basically. You're not really getting any smoke or anything in the baking chamber. Anyway, so and it's fabulously low tech. Nothing electric, no bells and whistles, and it's you can see we have a double stack of them, and we can do 20 pizzas a minute if we had to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
20 minutes I take it back. 20 pizzas every 6 minutes. It takes about 6 minutes to cook a pie.
Nice.
Yeah.
We'll get into a little bit of the menu.
Okay.
You got quite a big menu.
Sure.
I'm sure it's obviously changed over the years, and I see there's some
Not
new
so much.
stuff. Yeah, I mean a lot of staples, of course, but you've added some new things, and we'll get into those
we
too.
did some new things after the post-pandemic.
Yeah, we'll maybe get into that a little bit too. I know it's a sore subject for a lot of restaurants, but it's obviously dealt with it. You're here, so that's great.
Yeah,
that's great news.
We were one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, but I mean, pizza-wise, you got margarita, you got a prosciutto, arugula, baked potato, fennel sausage. You guys make in-house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is awesome. And then that has roasted red onion. You have a Mexicali Rose.
Yeah.
What's that one all about?
That's our tribute to California Pizza Kitchen. Here it's what is it? It's a Mexican-inspired pizza. It's peppers, chilies, smoked mozzarella, cotija cheese, chicken, and a chipotle sort of cream base. So we take what is our sort of pizza white sauce, which is sour cream base, and we puree some chipotle chilies into it, put some spices, and instead of a red sauce, we sort of use that as the sauce. Yeah, it's nice.
Nice twist.
Yeah.
You got pesto, veggies, of course, and then the works.
Yeah.
And then, of course, make your own.
Right. Yeah,
with,
for sure.
All your toppings.
Yeah. It's for the first 2 years we were open, that's 9 the preset pizzas. There's about 9 of them.
Okay.
And for the first 2 years we were open, we probably did 35 different pies in that slot. Everything from artichoke to clam to this to that. And after 2 years, these were the winners.
Okay.
And what we've noticed since then, because since then I said, Jesus, can we I got to change this a little bit,
Yeah.
Nothing works.
Okay.
So we've basically hit.
Not even pineapple?
Well, it's funny you should say that, actually, because that's number 10.
Oh, okay.
That's the one that we sort of think maybe we should get rid of the.
My wife wanted me to ask you that one.
Well, it was a good call. You're right. It's the one. It's the number 10.
Okay.
Okay. But I don't. The font is of a size I can't fit 10, so we keep it at 9. But no, it's what we found is that those 9 pizzas represent in this trade area anyway, like the
core,
the 9 favorite pizzas.
Yeah.
And if you take anything off, you've upset
You're
somebody.
You're going to hear about it. Yeah.
And there's nothing we can add to that list. Nothing I've tried and that will sell better than the one we took off.
Yeah, right.
So I and that's good, right?
That's awesome.
Pizza's like breakfast, right? People go to a pizza place and order the same pizza.
Yep. They want to come back and say,
I'm a pepperoni and mushroom guy. No matter where I go, I get a pepperoni and mushroom pizza. I don't care what they have on the menu, and people are like that.
Yeah.
And we're definitely a restaurant of repeat customers.
Yeah.
Or that pizza's, for a lot of families, pizza's like a once a week thing. We get pizza every Thursday, and I swear to God, they come and for 10 years they order the exact same thing every time. And now recently, during the pandemic, we had an opportunity to remodel the restaurant. So we did. Somewhere in there, I wrote a new lease with my landlord. So we opened up the pasta station.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. You didn't have pasta the whole time.
No, we did not.
So that is new post pandemic.
Yeah, that's been up for about 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. So
tell us about that. You got quite a menu on there too.
Well, we took the same sort of sentiment. The pizza was, like I said, simple things impeccably well done, and we took that same sentiment to the pasta station, and so we make the pasta by hand in the restaurant. Well, all of it, not all of it, but most of it, because sometimes package and store-bought noodle is the best one to use. It's sort of an apples and oranges kind of thing.
Okay.
And 5, 6 pastas, all really basic to the sort of, I think, fairly traditional pasta repertoire. Pesto, carbonara, bolognese, marinara, of course, spaghetti and meatballs.
You got a vodka rigatoni too?
Alla vodka, the rigatoni alla vodka. And keep it simple, keep it good, keep it fresh, handmade, homemade. And it's really that simple. It's done particularly well. It's selling like crazy.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a nice addition.
I think so. It's important to keep growing, right? In honesty, I was getting bored to tears looking at the same 10 items every day.
Yeah, and knowing in the back of your brain has like this whole repertoire of other things that you like, I could,
Well, yeah, so we opened the restaurant originally, there were no burners, right? The only gas-fired equipment was the pizza oven. And we did that intentionally, because when we were drawing it, the consultant was like, you sure you don't want to put a burner range in here? We were boiling garbanzo beans to make hummus on a hot plate and stuff like that, because I said, no, I do not. This is a pizzeria. I don't ever want to turn this into an Italian restaurant. Right? I don't want to do any of that. It's like, because if we got to be true to our school if we're going to succeed. We're all about the pizza. Because I knew it's like all we got to do is make the best pizza in Palo Alto, and we win. Yeah, that's all we got to do. And I don't mean singular best. We just got to be of the best. And I'm an idiot sometimes, and so 10 years later, you turn around and you go, well, we're leaving a lot of money on the table here. We're not, we have I like to think we're a much loved restaurant in Palo Alto. We have a very loyal audience. They want another opportunity to eat here more often.
Yeah.
If we just open up the menu, they'll just come more often because we don't need to convince them. They already love us. And we did. But it's the level of obsession that I bring to these simple recipes is high. And so, we spent a lot of time. Although the pandemic was it was just such a freaking nightmare that it's
a sore subject, but yeah, why don't you tell us how that went for you guys?
Well, for us, it went particularly well because pizza, as it turns out, who would have known, was a great place to be during the pandemic because the whole world was switching to takeout food. And pizza is a known Takeout food.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were
well known.
Yeah, we were already doing 30-40% of our business was takeout and delivery.
And that's what's great is you had a to-go model already.
Yeah,
built.
we had no skin off our nose to just ramp that up a little bit, you know. And you know, a lot of people, a lot of restaurants, a lot of mid-scale restaurants, and even fancy restaurants tried really hard to figure out how to sell their product without allowing people in the restaurant. And ultimately, you know, so there were those $34 short rib dinners packed in an aluminum container from DoorDash, which I just don't think ultimately didn't really cut it for the consumer.
No.
You know, it was expensive and
it's super expensive, and you know, we find out DoorDash is, you know, taking a huge cut.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, that's
away from the restaurants too.
Don't get me started on that. Although,
yeah.
But you know, having said that, they're still not making money. So
yeah.
You know. But anyway, so we were lucky. So for a year, basically for a year with the mandates, you couldn't let people in a restaurant. So it was all takeout and delivery. We sent home about half the staff, and the other half, my managers and a couple of cooks, the prep guys, we did takeout and delivery for a year, and then little by little they started opening up. People were then sitting outside, and we have tons of seating out there, so that helped. And then little by little it grew until, you know, and then there were the mandates. You know, then 6 months ago, everybody came back into restaurants.
Yeah.
But they were still very hesitant to sit down. Yeah, they were wanted to sit outside.
Well, fortunate, like Town and Country is a good spot to be in where you're at. A lot of foot traffic.
Absolutely.
A lot of people coming because they know there's businesses here that I'd say 80% of the businesses here are food related. And then the rest is just kind of shopping.
The ones that are doing sales, but yeah.
Yeah, but shopping and stuff. But at what point did you add the provisions? Is that a new thing as well, or is that at the same time?
That was purely for the pandemic, and we sort of stayed with it. So we figured if people were coming here to pick up a meal, come here and pick up 2 meals. And so we put together a line of frozen food, baked ziti, lasagna. It's varying things, everything from chicken tetrazzini to manicotti to stuff like that. And as we opened the pasta station, concurrent with that, or eventually concurrent with that, we said, well, we have fresh made pasta, we got all of these sauces, we might as well sell those too. People might want to take those home.
Yeah.
And then because we had burners and an oven, finally we started a dessert program. You know, nothing too extraordinary. Some cookies and some cakes and little things because who doesn't want something sweet when they pick up a pizza?
Yeah.
And so that became part of the provision. So all of a sudden we had this little repertoire of provisions, i.e. things people could take home and put in their fridge or their freezer for a day or two. Cookie dough, you know, if you want to. And it's not a huge seller, but it's a trickle, and every little bit helps. And I think it's a nice thing for our customers to have. You know, we had Howie's for dinner last night, and I got a Howie's lasagna in my freezer waiting for me,
and they can have that a week later.
Yeah,
whenever.
And it's a surprisingly good product. I mean, who the hell ever? I never made any frozen food. I was like, I don't know, how long does it take to reheat? I have no idea. So the pandemic, because people weren't allowed in the restaurant, we had got permitted to do this remodel about 5 days before the first mandates. Right.
Yeah.
So here we are, about to remodel, and then you can't let people in the restaurant. And at first I was like, well, but wait a minute, that's not such a bad thing, right? Because we can just remodel the restaurant. So we did. So we had a year to do a job that would have 2 months. So it was, it just made for a very nice project. You know, no deadlines.
Nobody in the way.
You know, plumber doesn't show up. It's like, who cares? Whatever. You come next week, sure. You know, it's like, because again, we're not going to be opening the restaurant for like a long. I mean, at that time, we remember the beginning of the pandemic when you're looking forward.
Well, at first it was 2 weeks, and then it was day to day,
and then it's like,
and then all of a sudden they just were like, we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, we may never. Are we ever going to reopen? And is this the end of the world, or isn't it? But having knowing lots of people for whom the pandemic was the end of their restaurant, for people of my contemporaries, these are people when they're getting to be in their 60s. It was an excuse to retire.
Yeah.
You know, you really want to start accruing debt. at age 63 and spend the next 5 years paying it off while you keep your restaurant alive. And then the pandemic also sort of created these, exacerbated all these conditions in the industry, and staffing issues and all kinds. I mean, it's a
supply
new
chain.
Yeah, it's a new world in terms of restaurants, and it's not to the restaurateur's advantage.
Yeah.
And but anyway, so that was as I tell my partners all the time, we're the lucky ones, And then of course, it's we, my staff was like, my staff actually made more money cumulatively as a group than they would have made if we were open. So between what I was able to pay them and what they were getting on unemployment, and then the PPP, the government programs, which are really oriented towards just giving people salaries, is what that was all about. So when it first happened, I brought food in. I got 300 pounds of beans and rice, and put them upstairs, and just told people, "What if you need food? It's here. Just come and get it." Right. Yeah. And because I was like freaked out. It's like, again, is this the end of the world? Like, what are these people going to do? They don't have any savings. They don't. It's like, this is a real deal. For these guys to be unemployed, it's serious business. And the good news is, kind of when all was said and done, they were working and getting compensated, or they were not working and getting compensated, and power to them. And so that worked out just fine.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Is there a favorite on the menu that's kind of your favorite? That you're like,
Well, of all like I said, people always order the same pizza. I was a cheese pizza guy. Like that's, I want the simple, purest thing. But I think the potato pie is really sort of, because I never tasted one. I never tasted a pie that had, it's thin, it's a white sauce, thin sliced potato, Gruyere and mozzarella cheese, Parmesan, garlic, chilies, rosemary, black pepper, and bacon. So it's
so good.
It's sort of like a potato gratin on a pizza crust.
Yep.
And someone said they had eaten a potato pie once. I'd never tasted one, and we just sort of said, "Well, how would you do that exactly?" And we just sort of fooled around with it, and it's just kind of yummy, right?
It is.
And it's the best munchy leftovers of all time. Right?
Yeah.
It's just a cold slice of that in the toaster oven at 2 a.m. is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Right on. Is there an item on the menu or something that you think everyone doesn't know about that you should be like, hey, you guys may not know something we...
Well, I would, other than the pastas, which is, the word travels slowly out here in the burbs. Like, it's not like San Francisco where people are standing in line for the next new croissant flavor. It takes a year to get the word out here. So people are still, we have people that have been customers here for 10 years are still walking in there going, oh, you have pasta?
Yeah.
But the new stuff, I think that, strangely enough, I think the real star of Howie's Artisan Pizza are salads.
Okay.
It's all from scratch. It's all fresh every day. We sell a ton of them, so the velocity is huge. It's always fresh. It's always crisp. And, that's kind of hard to find, right?
Yeah.
I notice when I'm tooling around in the world looking for a salad for lunch, and there aren't very many options,
Yeah, or there's like, here's a salad, but then we got like 20 toppings to throw in there, and
it's this big and costs $14
right.
with a crappy oil and vinaigrette sort of thing.
Correct.
But I think that's the real the singular item that people sort of talk to me about if I bum on the street is the Chinese chicken salad, which is just weird. But I've been making that Chinese chicken salad now for 30 years. It's the same one I made when I ran hotels in San Francisco. And we just kind of hit it.
Nice.
We kind of hit that one on the head.
Nice.
And I get it, because I spent like every day for a year eating one of them myself until now. It's like you look at the pantry and like, what's for lunch? It's like, I'm not eating pizza ever again. So what are we gonna have for lunch?
Yeah.
But it's. I hope I'm not being presumptuous when I say it's just really good food here. It's just simple and clean and fresh and maniacally from scratch, and it's a simple product roster. So it doesn't vary very much, and so we're always, it's a really, we use Chef's Warehouse and ITEL Foods, and of course the major dry goods thing. So we buy really, for a joint like this, we buy really good olive oil, we buy really expensive Parmesan cheese. The Grande Mozz is sort of biblical. It just can't live without it.
Can't go around it.
Yeah. But we have 2 other types of mozzarella cheese here, and so it's it's not a secret. It never has been.
Nice.
You do simple things and you do them well, and people respond to that.
Awesome. And a couple of things before we close it out.
Sure.
I'm a gear guy. I love tools and gear, and of course we use chef knives and stuff. Is there a favorite tool in the kitchen or at home for yourself that you love, that you're like, man, this is something that helps me out all the time?
Let me think about that. I mean, we just bought a pasta extruder, which is just a remarkably great machine.
What was it actually?
Well, so extruded
pastas
pastas are things that are 3-dimensional shapes, as opposed to laminated pasta, which are flat. So laminated would be fettuccine, tagliatelle, linguine, flat noodles, right? Lasagna sheets. Extruded pasta would be rigatoni, penne. Even though you can extrude things like linguine, but anyway, that's different. That's a different story. But anyway, those are the 2 basic types. So when we do flat noodles, typically we'll use like a little tabletop rolling type machine that looks just like the little hand crank roller you use at home, just a little bigger.
Right.
And when we make extruded pastas, we use this thing, this monster.
Yeah.
We paid $6,000 for.
And then it just pushes them out, right?
Yeah, it extrudes out. It forces through copper dies. It forces the pasta through. And it's the quality of the product is really great. I really didn't realize that when we, because you can buy a rigatoni in a box from Barilla or DiCecco. That's a really nice product. I mean, who doesn't love that, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the same as the extruded version, the handmade version of the same thing, where the dough is still soft and pliable and fresh when we cook it, right? It's different, and I like it.
Awesome.
It's got a great tooth feel. It's very very comforting and satisfying.
Cool.
Yeah. Although, many years ago, at that Cooking with the Great Chefs thing, I had the opportunity to work with Marche Hazan. And I spent a couple days with her making pasta. I literally got to stand at a bench. Marche Hazan is like sort of the Julia Child of Italy, for people who don't know her, that name. Again, she's passed away now, but she was like the grande dame of cookbook writers for Italian housewives. It's sort of the Julia Child equivalent. And when I was running the Mandarin Hotel, we brought her in to do a guest dinner. And so I was sort of her shadow for that week. And one of the things she wanted to do every day was actually, we're feeding, 50, 60 people a night. One of the things she personally wanted to do every day was make the pasta. Make the pasta dough. She'd let me roll it out. She's like, okay, I'm done now. She'd go have a whiskey and go to bed. But so we did. So I got for like a week, I got to stand next to Marche Hazan at the bench making pasta by hand, totally by hand, because we're standing next to a 20-quart mixer. Yeah. I'm saying, Marcella, I could put this in this thing we've done in a flash. She goes, and her line was, she said to me, if I can get this right, she said, there's many ways to get from the roof to the sidewalk. You can jump or take the elevator. The results are not the same.
Yeah.
That's what she said to me.
That's great.
So we did, like sort of 2 eggs at a time, little batches of pasta.
Yeah.
The best pasta you ever ate.
I bet.
And so she taught me, a lot. But one of the things she explained to me was that, which, at that time I was fairly naive to Italian food. She said, dry pasta is wonderful and fresh pasta is wonderful. They are apples and oranges, right? They have their own different uses. She goes, she said, I would never make a seafood pasta with handmade pasta. I would always use, a dry pasta. And they have all these, they have all these weird rules about it. And not everybody agrees on the same rules, but they have rules. And that's when you realize it's, dry pasta is fabulous.
Yeah.
Like that box of DiCecco you can buy in any supermarket around here is the #1 selling pasta in the world.
Yeah.
It's what Italian housewives use.
Yeah.
Or Barilla.
Yeah. Yeah, and then restaurants are using them as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it's I think you just kind of hit it right there. Is try some fresh pasta if you've never had fresh.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, for sure.
because a lot of people just have had just box pasta or
Well,
standard
who gets
pasta,
it is
yeah.
our Asian customers get it, right? Because they're crazy for noodles, and they understand it completely. So
Yeah.
they have a real respect for sort of noodle making, Americans they're pasta eaters. And honestly, I was not much of a pasta eater. I'm more sort of protein oriented kind of thing, and I had forgotten sort of how delicious a great bowl of noodles can be. And
Yeah.
if it's a great pasta and you throw a little olive oil, garlic, and Parmesan cheese on it, it's delicious.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be any better than that. It's like I remember when I used to teach people how to cook when I had real kitchens and real cooks. When I would explain, how we're composing plates, it's like, look, if we just take that fish and cook it perfectly and put a lemon next to it, it's perfect. So you got to give me a reason to make it better than that.
Yeah.
And if you can, you can. If you can't, then just give them a piece of lemon. Let them eat a perfectly cooked piece of fish, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Howie, I usually let people give any shout outs to any local businesses that you like or friends or anybody that you want to highlight.
Well, I'll shout back at Guillaume because he gave you my name, and
Of course.
now we'll be friends forever.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if I'm sounding catty when I say that I never really particularly liked the restaurants of downtown Palo Alto. They seem to be sort of corporate and uninteresting to me, compared to the fabulous array of restaurants that is San Francisco and the Bay Area.
Yeah. I mean, these are anywhere, so you can pick them all anywhere you want.
Okay. Well, we love around here. I had dinner last night at Zola. It's sort of our spot. The bar program there is like the best ever. Duncan, who runs the bar, now he's managing the restaurant. He's a real talent. Also around here, where do we go? Tofu House down the street in El Camino.
I've been there. Yeah, really good.
Super good. It's kind of bright
Korean,
inside.
yeah.
kind of
a little bright.
Bring sunglasses. If you know. And in the city, it's the land of Oz, man. It's just like there's no end to it. So I can't keep up with it. Where are we going this weekend? Well, I gotta cancel, but I had reservations at Sotomari. I don't know if you know that place.
Yeah,
that's super old school down in Fisherman's Wharf.
Very.
And it's a one dish place. They make the best cioppino ever. So it's fun,
Yeah, awesome.
And we were at Chez Panisse last week. It's always good. We were at the cafe upstairs.
Okay.
That's always great. We did. There's a Greek place, Taverna in Palo Alto, sort of ex-alumnus of Kokari.
Okay.
Sort of opened their own place. They've been really hitting a home run and expanding. We had a really nice dinner there. Really professional service, nice people, and I'd like to see them make a success of it. And that's about it. Down on the peninsula, it's all about Asian food, banh mi, noodles, dim sum, lots of good food that way down here.
Awesome. And then the rest, the floor is yours. You can give advice, promotions, whatever you like.
Gosh, I haven't shut up the whole time we've been on doing this thing.
You can say whatever you like. Close us out.
Well, what can I say? I'd say that, like I said, we just signed a new lease here, so they're going to be pulling me out of here feet first for my retirement. And we got the new pasta program, and we're just firing on all cylinders. We're back to, we're back in stride after the pandemic. Got a great crew, got a great management team, and we're just trying to do the best work we can every day, and we're just sort of, knock on wood, we're happy to be still alive after the pandemic, and looking forward to the next 10 years in Palo Alto.
Awesome. Thanks, Howie. And we can find you at howiesartisanpizza.com.
Most days.
And come get some pizza.
And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I don't get a chance to talk too much, and so I talk too much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for being on. Everybody, thanks for listening. We're out of here. Take care.
And as a quick reminder, the restaurants and gear talked about on each episode can be found on my website, foodoriginspodcast.com. I appreciate your support, and thanks for listening.